checked Ray Lindenberg's audio.
Yeah, I think it's still working. It was working before.
Well, hope springs eternal. And then I definitely see several other members, it looks like, of the applicant team. And then we may have some members of the public that are joining virtually, it looks like, perhaps. Okay.
Hi, Mr. Hearing Officer, David Cool, Development Services Director. I am here in the chambers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We have an attendee here who looks like they're calling in from an iPhone. The title of the attendee just says iPhone SE. Do you have a chance to unmute and so we can identify you and I can put your name on here?
Absolutely, yes. My name is Sydney Bowman. I am the real estate manager for Brosia QSR, who's a franchisee of Burger King and Popeyes. We are working with Runa for a potential Popeyes on the southwest lots there.
Okay, great, thank you. I want to make sure I don't spell your name wrong. Is it Sydney, S-Y-D-N-E-Y?
That's it. Yeah,
great, and then Bowman, B-O-W-M-A-N?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
And Sarah, did you want to check with anyone else before we start? Again, we haven't started yet. We're just trying to get organized for those that are on the call. And when we do start, I'll as clearly as I can, explain the process, and folks generally will remain muted until called upon to speak.
Yes, I see that there's one more attendee here. Pedro, I just want to check, are you with the applicant team as well?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
And
then do you have one more attendee named Patty O'Mahony? She is an employee. She's our permit coordinator who's sitting in on this hearing as well with staff. And I see that there is one other person sitting in chambers. Is it possible for us to identify, is this a member of the public who wants to comment later on, or another member of the applicant's team?
I'm the general contractor for the applicant.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, this applicant has clearly appeared before hearing examiner Reeves before, and they brought their entire team just in case I had questions. So as far as we can tell, it does not appear we have any members of the general public, as far as I can tell. Does that seem right to you, Sarah?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, well, why don't we start, and later on, when we get to that point in the hearing, we'll check again, but thank you folks for identifying yourselves. And so let me know when the recording is started.
Okay, we are recording.
Okay, get my gavel out, make it official. And good morning. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Oak Harbor Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, October 26, 2022 at 10 a.m. We have one item on the agenda this morning. This is numbers 2206-0038 and 2206-0044. Involving a request for a site plan review and conditional use permit to allow two separate businesses to be located on 3 parcels totaling approximately somewhere between 2.4 and 2.7 acres. I think the discrepancy being if we're looking at the third lot, but we can talk further about that. And normally site plan review would be an administrative process, but because we are using the consolidated review process under section 220 of the municipal code, both matters will be heard by myself. And ultimately, there's sort of 3 things happening. The applicant is looking to construct an indoor drive-through automated car wash facility on the northern portion of the property, adjacent to the intersection of Southwest Barrington Drive and State Route 20. They're also looking to construct a building, canopy, and other appurtenances for a drive-in and drive-through restaurant on the southern portion of the property, adjacent to the intersection of SR 20 and Southwest Pioneer Way. And then the internal improvements connecting the businesses, including drive aisles, additional parking, utilities, landscaping, and public improvements. And finally, the applicant intends on setting aside a reserve area for future roundabout construction at the southeast corner for the improvement of the intersection of SR 20 and Southwest Pioneer Way. I think by WashDOT, but there might be multiple folks involved, and ultimately the site is approximately at 31485 SR 20. So with that, my name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearing examiner with Sound Law Center, who the city has selected to hold certain land use application hearings like this one. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and the specific criteria for approval of site plan review and approval of a conditional use permit under the municipal code. To that end, I received several exhibits in advance of the hearing I had an opportunity to review. These include the applicant's materials identified as Exhibit 1. Within that exhibit, there's maybe 10 or 12, I would call them sub-exhibits, and I'll end up labeling them as such. So that did include various plans, technical reports, project narrative, information on soils, stormwater, a traffic impact analysis, and several sort of back and forths in terms of the review process between the city and the applicant. In addition to that, I was provided a zoning and vicinity map, information on the environmental review that occurred under our state's Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, including the determination of non-significance, or DNS, that was issued on September 16th of this year. Then information on the notice that was provided in relation to the application, as well as today's hearing. And then finally, sort of a matrix or Excel spreadsheet of public comments that were collected in relation to this proposal. So I'll go ahead and admit those exhibits 1 through 5 into the record. In addition, I reviewed a staff report prepared by city staff. It does not yet have an exhibit number, but we'll make sure to give it one shortly. And so those are the exhibits I reviewed in advance of the hearing today. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll go ahead and address admitting additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, our testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because were my decision to be appealed under our state's Land Use Petition Act, or LUPA, the recording of today's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits and my decision, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. And I may and often do ask questions of those that are testifying. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal so that within a couple weeks of the record closing, I'm able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. Finally, the order that we typically follow, and I believe we're going to follow today, is first, after I'm done, I'll swear in city staff who will give a brief overview of the proposal and sort of an explanation of the review process that led us to today's hearing. After that, we'll turn to the applicant team, and I know we do have a significant number of team members here, and my plan will be to sort of start with the applicant representative who is in the hearing room, Rune Harkstead, and have him then sort of direct traffic in terms of which team members he thinks it would be helpful to hear from. Then following that, we'll see if there are members of the public interested in testifying, and if so, they will have that opportunity, and we'll check at that point in the hearing to see if there are any members of the public that are interested in testifying. Folks will remain muted until called upon to speak. That's not because we're using a remote format or hybrid format. It's even if we were all in the room together, I would do my utmost to ensure that folks were not able to crosstalk or speak over each other and try to maintain some semblance of order. So that would be the basic plan. And then after we do hear from the public, if we do, then we would go back to the applicant and city staff to respond to any such testimony. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started, and I'll go ahead and get Mr. Lindenberg sworn in on behalf of the staff. Thank you for being here, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name for the audio and explain your role here at the city.
Yes, I'm Ray Lindenberg, Raylindenberg. Can't even spell my name today.
I was like, okay, as long as you think you know how to spell your name, but I have Lindenberg. Does that sound right, Mr. Lindbergh?
Thank you. I wanted to address the large amount of comments, public comment kind of first, just to get that out of the way in case there are any members of the public who have concerns about this. This was a widely shared and widely discussed project that is rather unusual for the city of Oak Harbor. And as I mentioned in the staff report, what happened is somebody had posted a photo of our yellow notice sign on the site on a local Facebook community page. And that post generated over 300 comments. I'm not sure exactly how many original, how many it's up to now. So what the city did, our public information officer, Sabrina Combs, generated a actual contact form and a comment form, and then posted that also on the city's website and then on the same community page, I believe, as the original post. And so we had the comments that came in that got presented to you in that Excel spreadsheet. And I wanted to address some of the comments that we saw on both forums there. And we appreciate and we love to have comments and community involvement. However, there are some of the things in there that are kind of a recurring theme that we cannot address as staff and you should not be addressing as the hearing examiner. And amongst those are opinions regarding the suitability of certain businesses over other businesses. The applicant has determined that their business will succeed here, and that's why they are in front of us today. It is not the city staff or the hearing examiner's role to pick which businesses come into the city. We don't contact outside companies and encourage them to come to this particular location. This is all driven by private property owners, private business owners, et cetera, and that is their role, and our role is to say yes or no whether or not it meets our code. And so I want to kind of get that out of the way to start, because I know that a lot of those comments are in that direction. And we, like I said, we appreciate the comments. We love the interaction. There are just certain things that we can't address. So.
I do not have the authority to cite a Trader Joe's wherever I want. If I could, I would have a Trader Joe's within a block of where I live. I think that was a recurring theme. Everybody loves Trader Joe's, but I certainly understand the point you're making there, Mr. Lindenberg. Essentially today, my role is to determine whether a conditional use permit is appropriate in terms of is a drive-through business, the type of business that is appropriate. Also just to determine whether the site plan meets the criteria and is designed in such a way to ensure no detrimental impacts on the vicinity and traffic, et cetera. But the sort of what business, other than in very rare circumstances that are inapplicable here, is far beyond the scope of anything I would be addressing. Is that the basic concept?
Yes, that is. And like I said, I think we really like the interaction. We want to encourage that. However, there are certain things that we just can't do. So
sure. And then I don't believe you told us exactly what your role is at the city. You were very excited to launch in, but Mr. Lindenberg, your role here at the city?
I'm the senior planner in the development services department.
Thank you. And then just one other question in terms of that issue. So Exhibit 5 is what I had identified as the sort of matrix, or it was an Excel spreadsheet and a PDF of the public comments. You had just mentioned that maybe some have kept coming in, to ensure the completeness of the record. Maybe I would suggest, at the end of the hearing today, we sort of make that the cutoff, and you can send me a revised Exhibit 5 with any additional comments that have come in since a week ago, if that makes sense. I tend to allow comments, up until the hearing ends, to the extent that with an open record public hearing, we do encourage public participation, and I'll leave it up to the applicant. We can ask his team later, Mr. Harkstead's team, but if they would like an opportunity to potentially prepare a response to the comments they haven't seen yet, I'd be happy to allow that. But at a minimum, I would like to maybe get an updated Exhibit 5 that simply just adds to the list if needed. Does that make sense, Mr. Lindberg?
Absolutely. We can certainly do that for you.
Okay, so that was thing one related to the public comments. The second question I had was, I don't know if you have a PowerPoint, but I thought to give an exhibit number to the staff report before we forget. Shall we make the staff report Exhibit 6?
That is certainly up to you. I think what our process has been in the past is that the staff report is a thing, and then the exhibits get attached to that thing. And so if that's just a process thing that we need to change for you, we can certainly work however your system works.
Sure. Why don't we? Okay. So because there's, well, let's just make the staff report Exhibit 6 today. And in terms of bigger picture process, we can work it out. I always prefer to have a staff report be Exhibit 1 and then all the exhibits numerically follow, just because fewer mistakes get made in terms of, what you're calling things. But I think for today, let's do that. And then at some point, procedurally, my staff and city staff can talk through non-project specific tweaks that would be helpful in the new year, but we don't need to do it today. But for now, let's just make the staff report Exhibit 6, and then any other exhibits we'll tack on at that point. Does that work?
That sounds great.
Okay, so I will hopefully quit interrupting you, although I certainly may have questions, but go ahead, Mr. Lindberg.
No, you're just fine. Okay, so your introduction covered a lot of what my introduction in the staff report includes. My understanding of the acreage is 2.4 or 2.39 acres, somewhere thereabouts. I think the applicant can probably address any additional acreage that might be included there. And we can discuss that further if we need to. Essentially, what you're looking at, there are the 3 parcels that are listed on the application, so that much is clear. We do have that information. As you mentioned, we have 2 facilities proposed there, the drive-through car wash and the restaurant. If these didn't have any sort of outdoor activity, which includes, by our definition, a drive-through or other, drive-in, drive-through, drive-up windows, etc., this would be a type 2 review, but because we are here, we have the consolidated review. It's type 3 for the conditional use, and you are reviewing the entire project as a site plan and conditional use. As mentioned, we have a reserve area for the construction of the future roundabout that's located at SR 20 and Southwest Pioneer Way. That is a WashDOT project. And so the applicant has coordinated with WashDOT to make sure that they have the right set of plans to make sure that we have the proper area set aside for that future development. And they are coordinating also with WashDOT and myself as far as any landscaping that's going to go in there. We don't want to plant a whole bunch of landscaping just to have it all torn out with construction. At the same time, we don't want to just have a bare, weed patch in that area. So we're going to coordinate that and make sure that we have appropriate landscaping in that area. I know the state does a good job of coming back and remediating landscaping after they do projects like this. We've seen other examples of where they've done that. So the concern is not so much the landscaping and everything, but just making sure that we have a reasonable progression of projects going through there, so we're not duplicating efforts on landscaping and facilities. So, as far as the site itself, it's a commercial area surrounded by C3 zoning. The way that staff kind of sees that is we're starting to see a division line of the west side of Highway 20 in that area being more car-centric, and the east side of that area kind of transitioning over to a more pedestrian-oriented neighborhood, if you will. The Central Business District is on the east side there, and we've been focusing on pedestrian-oriented development in that area for a long time. We've also had some residential development on that east side, so we're hoping that we're kind of building up a pedestrian-friendly area on the east side of Highway 20 there. However, we feel that kind of having these more car-centric type uses on the west side is still appropriate. We have a large shopping center essentially on both sides of that, with the Walmart and Safeway further west, and then the Hagans and Rite Aid to the north. And so it fits into the context of that area well. We feel like the design that they have proposed is appropriate and attractive, and the landscaping is also will be a benefit aesthetically to the community. I know there was a lot of concern about that expressed in the public comments, and that's something that I was working with the applicant from the pre-app process on through, and they've been really responsive to that as far as the aesthetics, the design of the buildings, including windows where possible. I know it's difficult for a fast food joint and a car wash to have, you know, lots of display windows. It just doesn't work by the nature of the project. But the design of the building itself and the landscaping, they included at my request some pedestrian amenities. For the Sonic in particular, having kind of an outdoor informal eating area where people can sit and, you know, have a slushie and relax. We've kind of based that on the experience of the Harbor Station project that's to the north of on SR20, where there's a frozen yogurt place that has an outdoor patio that's way nicer than it has any right to be, right next to the highway there. It's a pleasant experience to go outside and enjoy a frozen yogurt. So we feel that we can apply the same kind of logic to that Sonic location. So they have a walk-up window, they have an outdoor seating area, and I think it's going to be a nice addition to the community, and a nice addition for people in the community that don't necessarily have a car. Teenagers, older folks, people who just don't have a car for whatever reason can still go and enjoy a Sonic meal or drink or what have you. And it's close to the park and the beach, and I think that will be a good kind of interaction between those two uses. For the car wash, the location of that is kind of driven by the slope of the project. We originally kind of asked them to reorient the car wash if they could, but they informed us that there is enough of a slope on the parcel that it has to be essentially oriented east-west on the parcel. So they worked through getting the driveway figured out, and again, the landscaping and screening and everything of that project from the northeast intersection there at Barrington to make that as attractive as possible. The site plan itself, staff went through and reviewed the overall project with regards to traffic flow, parking, and all the usual things that we do. We feel that there's enough queuing space for cars waiting to go into both of those uses without kind of conflicting with each other. Our engineering staff looked at that and did a good thorough review on that. We do have the traffic impact report with regards to the overall traffic impact to the neighboring streets that are existing there. And we feel that they've done a good job of providing ingress and egress that will be appropriate and useful for their project and not create harm on existing streets. For the comprehensive plan, again, comprehensive plan and zoning, taking a look at the overall area, we feel that the context is appropriate for having these sorts of uses in that zone, in that land use district. It is high intensity commercial land use category. So this is pretty much what we're looking for is kind of those high impact, busy commercial projects that drive business and traffic into that area. The natural environment, this is an existing paved parking lot that was once a car dealership and gas station. So we don't see any negative impacts from this project. In fact, we see benefit from them doing landscaping and stormwater improvements and things like that. Public services are going to be easily addressed by the existing utilities that are in the area. Surface water management will be handled under the existing Western Washington Stormwater Manual as per every other project. We feel like we have typical fire protection and street improvements, all the things that kind of come with a project in an urban area we are not concerned about because it is an existing urban area and all of these services and utilities are existing there. One thing that did come up is that we have an easement through that area or through their parcel to allow for access into neighboring businesses that are to the west. And we want to make sure that those are addressed with the neighboring property owners so they can still get their vehicles in and out of there and do the deliveries that they need to do. And the applicant has been working with the neighboring parcel owners on that. to make sure that we have those. And that is included as a condition of approval of the conditional use and site plan review further down in the staff report. We don't have any proposal for a phasing plan, although there is the proposed future Popeyes project that is on that far south parcel. And that will come in as a separate application. The proposal wasn't able to be combined into one due to the sale of the property and some other kind of issues that came up with timing on that. So you'll see us back again for a Popeyes drive-through as part of this project, but they have been working together to ensure that the driveways and the common spaces and everything fit together. This isn't going to be just kind of tacking on a completely separately designed project onto an existing one. It's all coordinated, so that's a good thing for us. I already talked about landscaping. We're happy with what they've proposed there. We did work with them, like I said, on that set-aside area to make sure that we don't just have a barren weed patch in that space where the future right-of-way is supposed to go, because we don't know when that's going to happen. It could be still a few years off. Again, just going through the exterior design and landscaping on that, we feel it meets all of our design regulations and guidelines document standards for a commercial project. I feel like the landscaping is of definitely very high quality. The design of the buildings looks really good. And those pedestrian amenities, I think, will add an extra kick to the overall quality of the project. And we're really happy with that and looking forward to seeing what can happen with that development. So the conditional use standards and analysis, there's like 5 criteria here that talks about special conditions for the particular use. We don't have any special conditions that are specified for the project. It meets the standards for site plan approval, design criteria there in the DRG. And we have the conditional or the conditions of approval listed below. So those are as part of that. We feel that staff feels it does not have significant adverse environmental impacts. It's an urban area, as we've mentioned before. It was a car lot in the past and a gas station in the past, and right now is essentially a de facto car sales parking lot. So we feel that this will be an improvement to the property overall for environmental aspects. We feel it's provided with adequate parking. They went through their parking calculations and showed what they need. And when our code 1944 allows uses that don't have specific numbers or ratios, it allows the applicant to determine what those calculations should be. And we've concurred with what they have there for a car wash in particular. And then the drive-through restaurant or drive-in restaurant obviously has parking spaces for people to be eating in. It is served with adequate public streets, public utilities and facilities. As I mentioned before, we have all of the facilities and utilities in there, streets, utilities, public utilities, sewer, water, et cetera. And then the public streets are on 3 sides of the parcel. They'll have multiple entrances and exits from the location. And staff feels that it will not create an undue burden onto those existing facilities. It meets the purpose of the district, the zone district in which it's placed, and the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. We feel that it meets the goals of the land use element that encourages land use densities and intensities where services exist, that the location and the configuration of the land uses within our urban growth area are consistent and compatible. And as I mentioned before, we feel that this fits into the context of the neighborhood there. We're establishing and maintaining sufficient land within the city to ensure a wide range of public and quasi-public services to meet community needs. Again, the applicant has gone through their due diligence to determine if this is a need and will be a successful business, so we feel that it meets that standard. And then we have a balanced community that maintains residential and non-residential uses in a way that promotes environmental quality and aesthetics. And again, just going through that, we're trying to improve the overall environmental quality and the aesthetics by those standards that are found in the Western Washington Stormwater Manual, and also through SEPA and the design criteria. So again, that kind of ties up in a nice bow there the conditional use standards. You mentioned previously the SEPA determination. We went through and did the determination of non-significance. We did not have any comments or appeals on that. So no further action is required on your part. That one is kind of a separate set aside for us. And so in conclusion, we reviewed the application against our site plan conditional use permit standards and determined that the application meets those standards that are found in the Oak Harbor Municipal Code and also the design regulations and guidelines document. And again, we'll work with staff to ensure the compliance with all those requirements that are found in those documents through the civil plan review and any future construction activities. If there are any minor changes to be made, we always fall back on the project being in general conformance with the approved set of plans, and that will become the exhibit for this approval. And so we have our recommended action with the conditional use permit and site plan review and the conditions of approval 1 through 9 there. And so I am available for any questions or comments.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lindenberg. Some questions for you. You mentioned the Western Washington Stormwater Manual several times just now. Are we using the 2019 manual at this point? Is that accurate?
Yes, we have moved on to the 2019 version of the manual.
Okay. Excellent.
Actually, may I interject? This is Pedro, the civil engineer.
We'll come to you in a moment. I'm guessing there's going to be an issue on, I was going to ask the applicant about it. I know that the applicant has reviewed it under the 2014 manual, I believe with the 2016 additions, and there was information in the materials about, you know, depending on when the application is deemed complete, that'll determine which manual. Washington law doesn't, as far as I'm aware, it's not entirely clear on vesting in relation to stormwater. But Pedro, if you can hold on one sec, we will come back around. I'm gonna get through all my questions, and then we'll get clarification on stormwater. Next question I had, with consolidated review, it's always somewhat challenging to make sure I know exactly what I should be reviewing. Clearly, I'm reviewing the site plan and the conditional use permit. There is reference at various points in the materials and in the staff report to a landscape plan and to design review. Those are normally administrative. Is the thought that I stay out of those on this occasion, and any design permit and any landscape specific permit would be addressed through the civil review portion? Is that an accurate assessment? Or what's your thought, Mr. Lindenberg?
Typically, if we were doing a type 2 review on this as just a site plan, if there wasn't a conditional use, we would include the landscape plan and exterior design of the buildings as part of the site plan review. Okay. And so that is, when we have a site plan application come in, those items are included as part of it. And so the landscape plan and the exterior elevations are considered part of the site plan review and should be approved as such.
Got it. Okay. So I'll make sure, were this to be approved, I have not made up my mind, but that I have appropriate findings related to the design elements and the landscape plan. Is that accurate?
That is. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, give me one sec here. Some of my notes are more important than others. Okay. Minor question. The version of the SEPA DNS that I have doesn't appear to be signed. I'm guessing that's because of it's electronic, and for whatever reason, the one I got didn't have an embedded signature. But can you just affirm for me that that was indeed signed by the SEPA responsible official?
Yes, that's correct. We have a hard copy for public view if anybody wants to here in the office.
Sure. Okay. And then you had talked about the Popeyes, the potential Popeyes, and there's reference at various points to a binding site plan, and I think even a boundary line adjustment was mentioned as a possibility at some point. I guess my question is, in Oak Harbor, is a binding site plan review type 2 or type 3? And my only concern is if it is type 3, how would we be able to move forward now without a BSP? But if you can sort of.
Yeah, it is a type 2. And so that was the concept, is we were going to get through and make sure all of this was approved and make sure that nothing else needed to move around. As you saw in the set of plans, there were 2 generations of plan sets there. One that was originally submitted to us, I believe, in June, and then the second one that came in September, addressing some comments from our staff with regards to that access way, the internal driveway. And so when that got changed, things move around a little bit. So they wanted to make sure as applicants, and we wanted to make sure as staff, that we're all coordinating together. When those items come in, then we can, figure out where the exact property lines need to go. The other issue is that that third parcel, or that parcel where the Popeyes is going to go, is under ownership. Is changing ownership, and so we want to make sure that all the owners are all on the same, application when we get to that binding site plan. So it is something that staff can approve.
Okay, so so first off, just to be clear, there's no lot creation that's occurring through this process. Somewhere, I think in the SEPA checklist, there was reference to 3 new lots, and I think that wasn't the intent, was to give the impression that any new lots are being created, because that would create its own need for, some kind of site plan or binding site plan or short plat or whatnot. Not the case here. The binding site plan will be addressed administratively, ultimately, and essentially what that would do is whatever I would be approving in relation to these 2 businesses, would be augmented by the third, and the binding site plan would be the one plan to rule them all. And all the businesses and owners would sort of be bound by that. But there's no temporal problem to the extent that I can go ahead and review these in staff's opinion without worrying about the BSP at this point. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, and again, you're here because we have drive-throughs, right? So in this situation, if it was, stepping back even a little bit more, if this was just a situation where somebody wanted to come in and move the lines and not develop the property, this would be a boundary line adjustment. But because there is the addition of the buildings and the landscaping and common ownership of some of these things, and the easement providing access to those neighboring properties, we felt that the binding site plan was the best path to get that approved. And again, because we can do that at the staff level, it makes it a little bit more streamlined from that aspect.
Right, but no lot creation, because binding site plans can be used as an alternative mechanism under RCW 5817, and I just, because of what I saw in the SEPA checklist, I wanted to make sure there wasn't some strange aspect that nobody had thought about. Okay, sounds like we're okay there. Okay. Sorry, just working my way through here. You had referenced the fact this had been I believe, maybe even further back, it was a gas station, but I know there was a car dealership, and there was some concerns in the past about soil contamination, I think on the southern portion of the site. But that has been remediated to the best of staff's knowledge, is that right?
That's correct, and that honestly, that steps up a level from us, and the property owner would be responsible to remediate based on the requirements of the state or federal or whoever is, in charge of that aspect of it. And so we kind of step aside and say, the applicant needs to make sure that those are taken care of to the fullest extent, and the requirements of the state. And so we have kind of stepped aside on that portion of it and allowed them to work together to get that remediation completed.
Okay. And they're working with the Department of Ecology, or have worked, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask them about that. And then just in terms of the actual, one of the uses, the car wash use, from past experience, I know sometimes noise can be a concern in terms of the tunnel, but here, because the entire area is commercial, there's no sort of additional measures required in terms of buffering or landscaping. Is that right?
That's correct. We feel that the buffering and the landscaping, there's some kind of dividing walls, if you will, that will help screen some of the noise and the visual aspect of it. There's not residential uses around. There is a hotel that's kitty corner, but the impact, I think, will be lessened significantly just because of the orientation of the building itself and some of those additional landscaping and buffering aspects that they've included with the plans.
Okay. And then stormwater. So we did receive, and I did review a preliminary stormwater report, and I know we have the expert here that can speak more to it. My understanding is that stormwater is essentially going to be collected and treated as necessary, but then am I correct in stormwater then just is discharged to the Freund Marsh? Is that right? And I was just hoping for some clarification on that. And if you're not the best person to ask, I know we have an expert here.
I will defer to the expert. My understanding is the water needs to get treated before it gets released, but it is released fairly quickly because of their proximity to the water. And that is where my understanding of this process ends. So I will leave that to the experts.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 sec. I think I'm nearly through. And then, again, I know we have an expert here on the applicant team, but just in terms of the traffic, at least from what I saw in terms of traffic, sort of new PM peak hour trips, it appeared that the analysis was what was the previous use, even though it's not been used for a while, versus what the current use would be. And that ended with 27 net PM trips. Is that your understanding approximately, Mr. Lindenberg?
Yeah.
Okay. I asked because obviously any traffic impact fees would be based on that figure. And if the city's comfortable with that figure, who am I to question it? I just wanted to make sure that was the understanding. Is that right?
That is correct, and that's one of those that goes over to Public Works and the engineering division staff, and they, reviewed the report and everything, and did not express any concerns. So that we include that in the application as being part of the exhibits, if you will, and if any conditions of approval are needed, then we included that in there.
Okay. And then I think just the last one I had was I saw the letter from the Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation. I think I got that right. Yep. Saying they had no concerns based on the archaeological survey. I don't think I had the survey in the record. I know I always force you to give me more than you probably think I need, but just for purposes of a full and complete record, if you can provide that as well, I think I'll tack that on to Exhibit 1, those materials, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Okay, I think those were the immediate questions I had for you, other than no major alterations to the comprehensive plan or zoning code since this application was deemed complete that would impact the proposal?
That's correct, yes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lindenberg. And any other members of city staff you intended on calling on before we move to our applicant?
No, we do not have anybody else.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, with that then, why don't we turn next to our applicant?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is.
Hi.
Can
I'm
you
going to swear you in. Do you
Sorry.
swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
Yes, I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name and explain who you are.
Yeah, my name is Rune Harkestad. That's Rune. Last name Harkestad. And I represent the applicant as well as I'm part owner in the car wash business. So I can speak to the project overall and the car wash specifically. I will have our architect, Eric Koch, speak more specifically to the design, about the design of the Sonic primarily. And I'll have Pedro de Guzman speak to the stormwater situation. And if questions, Mark Jacobs is here with Jake Traffic to speak about the traffic study and so forth. So just quickly about the car wash. Three things I want to mention. One, noise was brought up. As you can notice on the site plan, the exit of the tunnel is entirely or is partially enclosed by a vestibule. Not only does that enhance the aesthetics, but it also serves as a great mitigation for noise. The blowers is the noisiest part, and we found that the vestibule directs the noise out towards our own parking lot and away from the corner. So we believe that we have greatly mitigated any noise concerns that way. Another thing, Mr. Lindberg mentioned the direction because of the topography. That also gives us another advantage by having an east-west orientation. That lends itself very well to solar. So this car wash will be partially powered by solar. And lastly, I read through the comments, a lot of the public comments, a lot of comments about, well, discharge of water use and so forth. This is a state-of-the-art car wash. We recycle about 90% of our water. All the sludge that comes off the dirty cars is collected, stored in an underground tank and emptied out by basically effectively sort of a septic company every 3 months. And then just in general about the car wash operator, it's a local Puget Sound startup company. This will be our 5th location in Puget Sound.
Okay.
And unless there are questions for me, yeah, any questions for me at this point before I hand it off?
No, I don't have any specific questions. I mean, you obviously had an opportunity to review Mr. Lindenberg's staff report, correct?
Yes.
And did you see any concerns or have any are you seeking any clarification of the conditions that have been recommended as part of that staff report?
No, we have worked very closely with the city of Oak Harbor since the very first pre-app back in March to come up with the plans, and we're very, very happy with the outcome and the guidance provided by the city in this process.
Okay. I don't have any other specific questions for you or related to the car wash. I think you did address the noise issue to the extent that, unlike in maybe other situations you've had where you're next to a residential area, there's no regulatory requirements, but it sounds like the vestibule, even just conceptually, I can sort of visualize what you're saying, is a way to ensure that noise from the big blower at the end after you go through the car wash, make sure the noise is properly sort of directed away from where that hotel is sited. Is that right?
That is exactly how we came up with the idea. On our first car wash in Kent, we were adjacent to a residential neighborhood, and that's how we came up with it and analyzed the noise, and it worked perfectly well. And also aesthetically, it works very well. So we have copied that to every car wash we've built since, in Marysville and then in Kent and also Chehalis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, at this point, I would suggest maybe you were going to have me hear from Eric Koch and then Pedro Guzman. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, why don't we go to Mr. Koch first? Because I don't think I have any specific questions, but I'm happy to hear from him. And then stormwater, I might have more questions on. So, Mr. Koch, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name and explain who you are.
Yes, Eric Koch, ERICKOCH, and I'm the architect on the project for the car wash and the schematic design of the Sonic.
Great, thank you. So anything you wanted to share, now's your opportunity.
Sure. So the typical car wash is one long blank tunnel. And so where we try to put these stores is on the busiest street. We want them to look as good as they can. And so we've kind of put together a design that we think is pretty successful at that. We have a lot of visual and textural changes and physical modulation of the building. So it's not just one material. We've got fiber cement panels. We've got 2 thicknesses of bevel siding for reveal. And we have stone at the base and an enhanced cornice at the top. We also have multiple colors to make it interesting. And we've also learned that having windows is a great way for people to understand that there is a car wash there. They see the cars going through the tunnel, and as Runa mentioned, the exit vestibule is great to control that noise, but also gives us a better look on the building at the end. You're not looking at the end of what looks like a jet engine. You see more of the architecture. So we've kind of come to this design after working with a number of cities and our own team, and this, I think, with the covered awnings, the solar awnings for power generation, is pretty good looking building, and we're happy to present this for approval.
Okay. I didn't have any specific questions, but if you don't mind sticking around just in case members of the public do bring up any aesthetic features and we could come back to you if needed, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay. So next we will go to our stormwater expert finally, and thank you for your patience, but I'll get you sworn in. And this is Pedro, sorry, is it Guzman? I don't have your name right in front of me, just your first name, but if we can unmute Pedro.
It's Pedro de Guzman.
Pedro de Guzman, sorry. Okay, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and then spell your name for the audio. Pedro
de Guzman, civil engineer. Pedro, Pedro, de Guzman, Deguzman.
Thank you for being here.
2 clarifications. One, there was mention of discrepancy of 2.4 versus 2.7 acres. The 2.4 represents the proper existing lot area as it is today, ignoring the Popeyes lot to the west.
Okay.
The 2.7 represents additional sidewalk improvements in the right-of-way. As far as the stormwater, we received an email from the city on May 25th from Alex Warner stating that, quote, Pedro, a full site plan submittal is required and it must be deemed technically complete by staff prior to June 30th, 2022 in order for your project to stay under the 2014 stormwater manual.
Right. Sorry, I know I had a note about that somewhere. So I guess, is it the applicant's contention that the appropriate manual, that you're vested to the earlier version, is that the basic concept?
Correct.
And the issue of whether stormwater can vest is a tricky one in state law. There's some guidance that has been provided by the regulatory agencies. I think, in my mind, ultimately, it's the kind of thing where I think I leave it to the jurisdiction on some level. But that said, as an expert in the field, do you see any major difference? I mean, here, because of the soil types, low impact development and, infiltration on site is not possible, which is, in my understanding, one of the major differences as we've, changed manuals over the years, putting emphasis on, infiltration on site and LID techniques. Here, it doesn't seem like that's possible to begin with, but ultimately, do you see any major differences in your mind that would need to be accommodated if one manual versus the other were being used, Mr. de Guzman?
The only comment when I look at the 2019 ecology surface water management summary of revisions, there's a note, minimum requirement number 7, flow control, has been updated to ensure that a threshold discharge or discharge to a marine water body, which includes us, meets all exemption requirements before it can be determined to be flow control exempt. A lot could be read into that. I would probably just want some confirmation from the city that you've seen our design plans. Do you see anything major that would change, i.e., a very expensive detention vault system that would be extraordinarily costly for my client?
And we'll come back around to Mr. Lindberg in one moment, but can you clarify my understanding of how stormwater is being addressed? My understanding is that there will be a vault system of some kind that at least captures and treats the pollution generating stormwater prior to it being discharged. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. We're not objecting at all to the storm treatment requirements. It's simply just detention.
Got it. Okay.
Flow control.
And then before we go back to Mr. Lindenberg, the issue of the Freund Marsh, I guess I was just trying to understand. So essentially, is it just stormwater gets collected and then after treatment, it is discharged to this area as it historically has been, and there's some exemption that gets discussed in the materials, but I was just trying to understand maybe what that was, who said that exemption exists. I just didn't have a full understanding of this.
That is correct. We are treating water and then discharging it without flow control to the existing storm system within Pioneer Way. And then it goes via city pipe systems all the way to the receiving waters, saltwater body. And net change in impervious will be a net decrease in impervious area and runoff flows from our site as a result.
Okay, so I guess that's something I missed. So it's not that you collect it in a vault and then it just immediately goes somewhere else adjacent to the property. You collect it, treat it, it actually enters the municipal stormwater system, and at the end of the municipal system, there's a discharge into that existing Freund Marsh saltwater body. I guess that's what I hadn't understood. So is that an accurate assessment? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Mr. de Guzman.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Excellent. Okay, so I think unless you had something you wanted to say, why don't we hear from Mr. Lindenberg and maybe he can clarify as needed. Mr. Lindenberg?
Yeah, I do apologize. I had forgotten that there was the cutoff, and we have we have utilized that date before to essentially vest, like you mentioned, other projects. And so my understanding is that staff has gone through and discussed that with our legal team to ensure that that is the correct way of doing things. I probably misspoke when I said that we're moving on to the 2019. I would defer to the city engineer, Alex Warner, and if he said that we're going to operate off of the previous manual, that indicates to me that he has a legal basis by which to do that, and I apologize for any misunderstanding on that.
Sure. So, well, to be clear, the city is moving to the 2019 manual, which is, what should happen in the long run. But in terms of cutoff dates, anytime a new manual gets involved, it gets tricky. And I know DOE actually has sent out guidance because this did cause a lot of legal issues several years back. So I think ultimately I will defer to city staff's analysis and review. It sounds as if, based on the application complete date and the conversations that Mr. de Guzman has had with other members of staff, it would actually be the 2014 manual. And I can leave that, again, beyond the scope probably of what I have the expertise to address. But hopefully that at least clarifies things for Mr. de Guzman. Is that right, Mr. de Guzman? You were worried about not treatment, it was flow control. You just wanted to make sure you didn't have to, be able to address a 1,000-year flood or something like that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then, Mr. Lindberg, my understanding of how the stormwater actually will go to the municipal system, and the Freund Marsh, all of that is an existing system the municipality has in place. And so long as the applicant treats the stormwater as required before it enters the municipal system, staff has no concerns. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I think then that addressed my stormwater questions. Mr. de Guzman, I get the sense you might not feel 100% today, and I don't want to keep you if you're not feeling well. But I appreciate you taking the time to be here and answer my questions. I don't have any further questions.
That's fine. That might help.
Okay, so with that, I don't believe we had other members of the applicant team that were immediately going to be called on. I didn't have any specific questions for Mr. Jacobs, just in case the public has questions ultimately, perhaps if he can stick around for a sec. But Mr. Harkstad, did that conclude the folks you were immediately planning on calling on?
Yeah, I think so. Been some talk about the Popeyes, and I see there are two representatives from Ambrosia on the call. But for the purpose of this hearing, yes, the focus is on the car wash and the Sonic. But I just want to state that we are working very, very closely with the Popeyes team, so that at the end of the day, this will be a seamless project. They're just a little behind us. We want to get in the ground sooner, but they will subsequently be submitting for their. And I just want to assure you that we are working very closely with them, both with regard to site plan layout and changes in existing easements, etc.
Sure. And I think Patty O'Mahony was one of the Popeyes, or was it Sydney Bowman?
Sydney Bowman.
Can't. Sure. Why don't we just hear from Sydney Bowman real quick, just to see if there was any clarification on behalf of the Popeyes team. So I'll swear in Sydney Bowman. Mr. Bowman, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
This is Sydney Bowman, and yes, I do.
And that might be Ms. or whatever your pronoun is. Thank you for being here. Could you just spell your name for the record?
Absolutely. It's Sydney. Last name is Bowman, Bowman.
Great. Thank you so much. And just wanted to, because of the somewhat disjointed nature of things, just want to make sure if your team or you on behalf of your team had any clarifying points you wanted to make in relation to how the third cog or third leg in a tripod in terms of the BSP would all fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am here with our Chief Development Officer, Ian Poole, who's also on the call. So we are currently working on acquiring the property to the west. That's currently a restaurant, existing building. And we close on that property on November 21st. And so that combined with this southern parcel that will be all incorporated with the BSP will give us enough room for that development. And so we will be submitting, and we are looking forward to the project and working with you.
Okay. Well, I don't have any specific questions other than obviously your team appears to understand that you will have to go through this process as well, because there, I assume, would be a drive-through, and you understand that, and that likely a binding site plan ultimately, which is administrative, but would be part of that. Does that all make sense?
That is correct, and that makes sense.
Okay, great. Well, I don't have any specific questions, but thank you for being here. So at this point, I think we'll check to see if there are any members of the public. It does not appear we have anyone in the council chambers. Okay, it doesn't appear so. And then in terms of folks that are not explicitly related to the applicant team, I see someone identified as Adam, I think is the only name.
Yeah, I'm the architect with Ambrosia.
Oh, okay.
So just hanging on here to listen. Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Sarah Heller, our intrepid clerk, does it appear, am I correct in thinking there are no other members of the public?
I believe that is correct. There are no other attendees that have entered the meeting, and it doesn't appear there are any other attendees in person in the chambers as well.
Excellent. Yeah, Ian Poole was just identified as related to the Popeyes project, so we solved that mystery. That said, the raise hand feature is enabled. If someone had a comment they were hoping to, well, and Ray, Lindenberg, I will come back to you, I promise. But in terms of those other than city staff, feel free to use that raise hand feature if you had any clarifying comments, and I'll make sure to call on you. Give it a moment. Okay, I think we're okay. The other option is to flail your hands about on the screen as Ray Lindenberg did. And we'll go back to Mr. Lindenberg. Mr. Lindenberg, any final thoughts or comments on behalf of the city in relation to this project?
I just wanted to let you know I'm right now sending you the archaeological report that was submitted to us. I'm sorry that didn't make it into the original set plans.
Not a problem at all. And then also just a reminder, so no final thoughts or comments before we end up closing the hearing. We're getting to that point.
No, I don't think so. A lot of things were brought up during the discussion. The impacts to neighboring properties and those sorts of things. And like I said before, overall we feel that this is fits into the context of the neighboring properties in the neighborhood there as it is. And the applicant has been really responsive as far as addressing our concerns as far as screening and buffering and noise and all that sort of thing. So it's been a pleasure working with them, and looking forward to getting the project complete as we go through that.
Okay. So that said, just to clarify things, ultimately it will be 6 exhibits. I am going to alter a couple things to the extent that we're making the staff report exhibit 6, and then my plan had been to amend exhibit 1 by adding the archaeological report. And it's generally my policy to sort of give sub exhibits to the application materials, so that if there were further review or for members of the public, it's much easier to sort of find things instead of one giant 400 pager. And then also we're going to update exhibit 5 to the extent that if there are additional public comments that came in between when that exhibit 5 was created and now, that will be included. That said, I had pointed out, and I do want to ask Mr. Harkstead, Rune Harkstead, if you could come back to the podium for one moment. this is totally up to you. I would be happy to leave the record open if the applicant wants an opportunity to potentially address any public comments or not. It's completely up to you. I want to have the potential of public comments you have not yet seen as the applicant that are being included in the record without you being able to provide a response. But your thoughts on that particular issue, Mr. Hogstead?
No, I think it's fine to close
Okay.
as of this hearing.
Okay. Anything final you wanted to add before we conclude?
No, just thank you very much for your time, and thanks to the City of Oak Harbor.
Okay, great. I think then with that, we will go ahead and end our hearing today. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to participate and answer my questions. Or if you didn't have questions asked of you, thank you for taking the time to be available. I will further review all the materials that have been provided and the minimal amount of additional materials that are coming my way. And produce a decision here in the next couple weeks. And once that decision is produced, Mr. Lindenberg, well, I guess Ms. Heller is probably the best person to ask, but those on the applicant team, I'm confident we'll be able to get a copy sent to them. And then members of the public that have participated, how would they end up being notified? Either Sarah Heller or Sarah, maybe you're the best person.
Yeah, if there's anybody who's requested the decision, we'd be sure that it gets sent to them.
And sounds like Sarah has helped with her today, but thank you, Ms. Hiller. So this decision will be made available to those that have participated. And with that, we'll go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you, everybody. I wish you all safety and good health heading into the winter season. Thanks all.